Hey miners, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. In today's video, a very special interview for you. Dennis Porter, he's the CEO and co-founder of Satoshi Action Fund. This is a global leader in terms of Bitcoin adoption and policy. They've already passed a number of bills in the United States and are playing a lead role in terms of both the US federal Bitcoin strategic reserve and strategic reserves at state level. Now, we've got a lot to talk about in today's presentation. Before we get into it though, take a second, smash the like button, you guys. It's a big help to myself and the channel, specifically helps get this content out to other people interested in Bitcoin. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below how you're feeling about the Bitcoin sector overall. If you feel we're going to see a US Federal Strategic Bitcoin Reserve in 2025, and your price prediction on Bitcoin for the final few weeks of 2024. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, backed by popular demand, we've got Dennis Porter. He's the co-founder and CEO of the Satoshi Action Fund. Now, Dennis, I joked in the intro, you're probably the most busiest or popular guy in the States right now based on this Trump victory, all the legislation, the policy, the excitement we're starting to see around Bitcoin legislation. So once again, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for making the time.
I'm glad to be back here on one of my favorite shows. Well, I've told people this is one of the only shows that I regularly watch. You know, when you're busy moving and grooving in the space, you don't have a lot of opportunity to listen to content. And so glad to have my opportunity to be back on the show here with you guys and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, most definitely. That means a lot, especially coming from you. So thanks for supporting the channel, Dennis. Now, first question is, since this Trump election, what is the general feeling at Satoshi Action Fund? What does the day-to-day look like? What is the excitement level in your conversations and meetings right now?
Well, the enthusiasm and the momentum and the excitement is palpable. I mean, we literally cannot explain how just incredibly different it is compared to when we launched Satoshi Action just a few short years ago. In June of 2022, we had lawmakers who were just getting the news of the SBF collapse, the FTX collapse, and we were having to try to get secure meetings to tell them, let's do some Bitcoin stuff together. You know, lawmakers were looking at us like, is Bitcoin even really a thing anymore? Like, is this even around? So we certainly had a hard time moving the ball then. Compare that to today, and we have lawmakers literally, quite literally sliding into my DMs, emailing us, reaching out on our contact form and saying, we want Bitcoin, we want more Bitcoin, we want to do strategic Bitcoin reserve policy. I'll finish this spot with saying that we had the greatest thing about where we are right now is we're not just having lawmakers who are realizing, waking up, oh, that Bitcoin is popular. We have real Bitcoiners getting into office. We have a state senator who reached out to me recently. He said, I've been a Bitcoiner since 2017. I just got elected to the state Senate, and I want the very first bill I introduce to be a strategic Bitcoin reserve piece of legislation. So huge difference, tons of momentum, and we're proud to be here at the tip of the spear, leading the charge for Bitcoin here in the United States.
That's awesome to hear. I mean, let's take it a sort of stage further and sort of like give the listeners, what's a week like in Dennis Porter's life at the moment? What sort of like, just general, like, general, not going into too many specifics because obviously some things you can't talk about. But what's your week like at the moment in terms of meetings and traveling, I suppose, all over the place?
I listen, a pack with calls. I'm gone more than I'm home, and racking up those airline miles. At least I got a nice status. Thank God for Alaska Airlines. They take good care of us. It is very busy. You know, I'm pretty much on the phone the entire time, and I'm really working with a lot of lawmakers across the country, but also the world. I mean, this is the great thing about what we've done is because of our position at Satoshi Action, where we have been able to not only introduce over 30 pieces of legislation in 20 different states and pass law in 4 different states, we've also been able to produce research, even peer-reviewed research in top 2% journals. And so the lawmakers, they're seeing all the success that we've had in the past, and they want to do Bitcoin policy, but they just don't know how. So we're getting tons of outreach. Even, I mean, there are groups that are trying to do things here in the United States with the state lawmakers. on strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation, and we will love when more groups help. But they just don't have that policy experience. We'll come across the bill that they're trying to run, and we have to practically rewrite the whole thing because, at the end of the day, policy, it's really important. Like think about Bitcoin for a second. 21 million, the way that that's written, it's perfect. It's simple, but it's perfect. Policy is the same way in the real world. It needs to be simple, but you got to get it right. If you don't get it right, all sorts of bad things can happen, lawsuits, you name it. So we're putting ourselves in a great position to help lawmakers here in the United States with those skills and across the world. And just on a daily basis, we're trying to do our best to position ourselves for 2025.
I mean, you mentioned trying to do your best. I mean, I'm assuming there's been a lot of lessons learned over this period that you've been involved. And are you able to use those lessons learned actually to sort of like now take things a stage further, as state by state start requesting the same type of action that's required? And does it differ from state to state, or is it a case of now you've found the model that works, you can replicate that model across the US?
Yeah, it's a great question, Anthony. It's certainly somewhat of a model. Every state is a little bit different. Every jurisdiction, every country is a little bit different, some more than others. But there certainly is a model that we have built and a strategy that we have built for how we approach the political space. The biggest one being that we pursue achievable but yet exciting victories. The reason why I say exciting is because if it's not interesting enough, nobody wants to pass, nobody wants to work on it, nobody wants to pass it. But also achievable, something that can actually be moved forward. That's why we started with right to mine. That was our first bill. We passed 2 of those into law. And then the next year, we expanded that to include right to self-custody, right to run a node, right to peer-to-peer transactions. Because as we got further away from SBF and as we scored more wins as an organization, the Overton window of what we could accomplish shifted. It changed over time. And so we're in this incredible place now where we have all these wins, multiple seasons of passing legislation, multiple times where our model has worked really flawlessly. And now we're gearing up for the most exciting time in Bitcoin policy in the entire time I've been around. When you were looking at Bitcoin policy 2 years ago, there was no light at the end of the tunnel. Now we're way past the light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to see lawmakers across the U.S., at least 10 states, maybe up to 11 or 12 states, are going to introduce strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation here in the US. And then I think there's like 6 countries who are either working on it or already have started to build a strategic reserve. And so there's all this momentum. It's incredible. The election played a big part of it, but it's not just all to Trump, right? Trump was one big thing. He won and he was pro Bitcoin, and that was great for Bitcoin. The other big thing was some of these lawmakers who pretty much lost their race just because they were anti-Bitcoin. Sherrod Brown, he's been a senator for a long time. He's been a member of Congress for a long time. He's the chair of Senate Banking, and he became very anti-Bitcoin, and he lost his race almost entirely because of his anti-Bitcoin position. I wouldn't say that's the only thing, but it was certainly the major factor. And so because Sherrod Brown lost his race, and because it was really focused around Bitcoin and digital assets, I think other people are looking at that and going, wow, this guy just got taken out. He's a powerful senator. He just got taken out because of his anti-crypto, anti-Bitcoin position. That sends, shivers down the spines of politicians, especially the anti-crypto ones. I think you're going to see a major change of tune from some of these lawmakers. They're going to look at this and say, hey, you know what? Actually, I don't hate crypto so much. I don't hate Bitcoin so much. In fact, I'm a big fan of this stuff because I want to get $200 million dropped into my race to support me. That's what happened to Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown had $200 million placed in that race against him by the crypto industry. And at the end of the day, I'm not a big money guy when it comes to politics. I don't think we should be spending all this money in politics, but that's the system that we live in right now. And if you want to survive as a politician in the system, you're going to have to watch out for the Bitcoin and the crypto industry, because it's not only is it putting more money into these races, you also have people all across the spectrum jumping in, trying to help make a difference. Everything from me launching my own organization to Bitcoiners running for office and winning office in places across the US as well. So it's a very exciting time, and looking forward to continuing to push the ball forward, especially with all this momentum on our back.
In terms of those, 10, 11, 12 states that are very much interested, are you seeing any of the Democratic states showing interest, or is this largely Republican states which were very pro during the election?
Well, think about Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was the first in US history to introduce this legislation at the state level. We were proud to be a big part of that. And that's a purple state. In the House, that's controlled by Democrats. And actually, just a few weeks prior, the Pennsylvania House, which is controlled by Democrats, passed our Bitcoin rights legislation through the House. So that's a big win, and that just kind of shows that I think that this is a bipartisan or nonpartisan issue. Certainly, you're seeing Republicans lead. No one is doubting that Republicans are leading on Bitcoin and digital assets, but ultimately, I think that you're going to have the whole country embrace this technology. And Senator Lummis agreed with me on Twitter Spaces just last week. She and I hopped on to talk about what we were doing for strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation. She's at the federal level, I'm at the state level. And she multiple times affirmed the need to get Democrats on board with her legislation and that we need both sides on board. During the election, you're going to see both sides ruthlessly attack each other and we all act like we, can do it all on our own. But, after the election, we got to come together as a country and we got to start working on the business of securing the future for the American people. And that requires both Republicans and Democrats to work together.
Now, Dennis, I know I've been following you obviously on Twitter and I keep seeing the updates, 8 states, 9 states, 10 states. I think you did get up to 11. Can you talk to us a little bit about the scale and the scope? What are these states actually proposing in terms of the strategic reserve? Are they putting in 1%, 10%? Are they buying all up front? How does that compare and contrast to what we've seen with Senator Loomis and the federal plan of 200,000 Bitcoin per year starting in 2025?
Yeah, Senator Lummis certainly has a very ambitious plan for acquiring Bitcoin and putting it into a strategic reserve. At the state level, we're pursuing a strategy of making sure that, first of all, we need to get this thing across the finish line. That's our goal number one. Enact the strategic reserve, establish the strategic reserve, enable the states to hold Bitcoin in perpetuity. That's goal number one. Goal number two is talking about, how much you can buy or how much you will buy. We have said in our legislation, which is a model policy that's being copied across the world, we said 10% because we already have legislation that says that states, and it's passed into law in some states, that states can hold up to 10% of their treasury in gold and silver, in sound money. There's a big sound money movement across this country, predominantly in red states or in chambers that are controlled by Republicans. And those states that are doing that, they are looking to add sound money metals like gold and silver to their treasury. We think that they should add Bitcoin as well. Some of the ones that are already working on this legislation, in fact, we are working with them and collaborating with them. We believe in building a coalition, even outside the Bitcoin space. And this is the great thing about Bitcoin. There's so many things about Bitcoin that cross over into other types of movements where you can get them to work with you. And one of them in particular is the sound money movement. The sound money movement, they love the Bitcoiners because we work together to be able to help all types of sound money, including Bitcoin, to be able to be passed into law, to be able to held by the state. That's already happened in one state for gold and silver. It's a 10%. We're going to copy that right now. Of course, that can change as time goes on, especially, taking a step back. Once these states pass these pieces of legislation, we'll certainly be continuing to push on the pedal to say, hey, well, this is exactly how much you're going to buy, and this is exactly how much we're going to add to the treasury. This is exactly how much we should add to the pensions. The great thing about Satoshi Action is we're much more nimble, and we can come back year after year to progress the ball forward. And so for us, it's really sort of a special situation that we're in, where we can be the first ones to build those strategic reserves. We can be less prescriptive. Because at the federal level, you have to map the whole thing out. This is the rough thing about being in Washington, D.C. They make you plan every little thing along the way and go all the way to the end. At the state level, we can take chunks at a time and come back for the other part later. There's a famous Reagan quote: "It's I'm going to get half the loaf and I'm going to come back for the other half later." We certainly believe in that philosophy when it comes to policy at the state level in the U.S.
So that being said, Dennis, at a federal level then, with Senator Loomis and her ambitious bill, do you have any insights now that Trump is starting to plan for his administration? Is that going to come to fruition? When are they going to start that? How difficult will it be to see that bill be pushed through?
Well, it's a great question. Washington, D.C., as I mentioned earlier, is a very difficult place to get policy across the finish line. It requires quite a number of different groups coming together to be able to get it to move forward. I think that the best hope that Senator Lummis' camp has is to hope that Donald Trump, President Trump will be able to enact an executive order to get the ball rolling. There is a number of people pushing for this type of effort to have an executive order issued so that they can get the ball rolling on creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve and then create political momentum as well, so that from there, they're able to go out and get the legislation done. I think that if you stick to just an executive order, that is going to be very problematic because the next president could just come through and wipe out that executive order. In fact, that's very common amongst presidents when they come through to just unravel everything that the previous president did, especially if they're from a different party. So the chances of it happening in 2025, I would always say they're anywhere between 20 to 30%. I think that's where the betting markets have it at. Now, that can change a lot if an executive order happens. That's a big boost. That changes things a lot. Once we start passing this legislation at the state level, that will start changing things a lot. And on that note, we do have a state that we are working with that we think is a near 100% chance of passing our legislation into law. The reason being is there's a task force that passes legislation before the legislative session starts. They review legislation and they give it an early thumbs up. Every bill that's made it through this task force has passed into law. 100% of the bills. Our bill just passed through that task force. And so now we have what we believe near 100% chance of passing in one state. Those types of results will dramatically increase the odds of passage at the federal level.
Awesome. In terms of countries adopting Bitcoin, Mike Alford's tweet this week that there's another country potentially going to announce it. We've always heard other countries in the space, once El Salvador, which is really the only country at the moment that has adopted the Bitcoin standard. Can you tell me from your experience? I know you've travelled and you've had family living in El Salvador. What's it like being in a country that has made that change? Is everything as we expect, or have there been some challenges?
Well, there's always challenges, I think, no matter which way you want to approach it, especially in a growing country like El Salvador. But I will say that despite some of the concerns around the approach and the tactics that have been used by the Bukele administration, certainly the country is much better off. As I said before the show started, my family has lived in El Salvador for roughly 15 years. They have been there really since the launch of Bitcoin. And they have seen the country grow dramatically, especially in the last several years since Bukele has started to make big changes in the country. I mean, my parents were telling me, my brother was living there at one point too. My parents were telling me like, oh, you couldn't even go out at night. You would have to walk around the streets like looking over your shoulder because the crime was so bad. In fact, they told me one time there was a gentleman there who was working with them and who got picked up by the local gangs. And they told him he has to join the gang. And he just said he's not going to join the gang, and they killed him. So that was a very common thing. That was a very common way of life in the country. You heard Bukele recently say that what is freedom if you don't have the freedom to live? I tend to agree with that statement. Crime is at an all-time low in the country. It feels safe when you go out at night. There's buildings being built everywhere you go. There's highway projects. There's new libraries being built. You're almost watching, to an extent, you're watching an underdeveloped country become a developed country in real time. Now, that being said, this is all taking place in the hubs of the country. San Salvador, the capital, these places are booming. They're booming with business. They're booming with opportunity. The rural parts of the country still need a lot of help. I was out in the rural parts of the country. There's parts without electricity. There are parts without running water. So there's still quite a bit of progress that needs to be made, I think, in the country. But at the end of the day, things are looking very, very bright for El Salvador.
Hey, just one quick one for you before we let you go here, Dennis. We've talked a lot about on the channel, the strategic reserves, the ETFs, the amount of money and attention in Bitcoin. So our final question for you, and then we can talk quickly about Mining Disrupt. Do you feel like this Bitcoin cycle will be different? I know you've been around the block for quite some time. You've seen a number of these cycles play out. Do you feel like this time is fundamentally different?
I think it will become different, and it could be this cycle once we get to the other side of the exchange supply curve. So if you think about it this way, people always say, well, there's always diminishing returns in Bitcoin. Every cycle, we get a little bit less of a bump percentage-wise. But that is because we have had more and more and more supply of Bitcoin coming onto exchanges. As we start to get to a place where there is less supply on the exchanges, which we have seen that happen, we think we are at the beginning of that. We don't know yet. As we have less and less supply available on these exchanges, and more buying starts to come in, especially from governments and nation states, you're going to see Bitcoin explode. You're going to see it blow away all the other previous cycles, in my opinion, especially the last 2 cycles. This could be the first time in my history in Bitcoin since 2017 that I have seen Bitcoin outperform the previous cycles and all the ones that I've experienced. I think we could be there. It really just depends on the supply curve. We're actually having a paper coming out about this soon, talking about the supply curve and how far we've come along it and how far we have left to go. It's sort of a question mark. No one really knows for sure, because what if we jump to 200,000, all of a sudden a lot more Bitcoin might come onto the exchanges to be sold. No one really knows where people are willing to start selling Bitcoin at, but it could start happening now when we see those exchange supply levels drop down and then Bitcoin explodes in price because there's just really no way to get it.
Makes sense. Hey, now I know Mining Disrupt is only a couple of months away. Anthony and I are booked in. We're very excited to come down to Florida, get away from Canada and UK for a couple of weeks. I wanted to talk about the event. We've actually put it up on our website as well, Dennis, so people can go in, they can take a look at the dates, the speakers, buy tickets. I know you guys gave us a discount code. What can people expect from Mining Disrupt?
Well, Mining Disrupt last year, I mean, I've been helping the guys at Mining Disrupt this will be my 3rd conference now. So I'm really excited about where we're going. The first couple conferences, the first one I got RFK to come as a speaker. And then as I was an MC that year as well. Then the second year I came back, I was an MC and I designed about a quarter of the content. I brought in Senator Cruz and Fred Thiel for a fireside chat, got Luke Dash Jr. and the Ocean guys to show up as well. It was a great conference. We had record sponsorships, record media partnerships, and record attendance. And that's why the team decided to double down and go big for this conference, especially with where the price of Bitcoin was going. We got a totally new venue. We're going to be in Fort Lauderdale. It's going to be at the Broward Convention Center. We've got a lot of great speakers lining up already. We just knocked down Samson Mao, so he's going to be there. We're talking to a lot of the public mining executives. We also, a brand new vertical this year is going to be focusing a lot on the analysts, whether that be the buy side, sell side, and retail analysts like yourself, to be able to participate in the conference and create an opportunity for more of the analysts to be in direct contact with more of the public mining companies that are in this space. We have H.C. Wainwright has signed up to participate. We're very excited about that one. They're one of the most important, we think, on our list. We also got Macquarie, B. Riley, Stifel, all coming. We even got some of the investment banking groups to join in as well, like the Cohen guys. It's going to be a conference that blows out all the other conferences. And one of the things I'll say to the people in the Bitcoin mining space, they often say, well, why should I go to this conference over the other? I've been to a lot of conferences. There's very few conferences that I'll throw my weight behind. I throw my weight behind this conference more than any other conference. But the reason why you should really go is because remember when you're at one of these big conferences, these mega conferences, you book like your whole schedule. It's like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You got to go see the next guy. Everyone's always thinking about the next meeting. And then you're like wading through a mob of people. You're trying to get to where you're going. Everything's really far apart. It feels stressful, to be honest. When you come to Mining Disrupt, everybody you need to talk to is in the room with you. Nobody's going anywhere. They're all there. They have a lot more time availability. You're actually able to sit down and talk to the people, especially if you're in the mining industry. It's critical. Talk to the people that matter to you. And they're not like aiming their feet out the door to go to the next meeting because they haven't like jam-packed their entire schedule. I know what it's like. I've probably been to more of these conferences than most people in the space. And there's a reason why I'm getting behind Mining Disrupt. Not only because I'm very passionate about the mining space, but because it is just such a high signal to noise ratio, and you don't have to deal with a million people waiting past you as you're just trying to go to the bathroom.
We found that in Nashville, actually, when you have to really try and plan your time. And actually, there was a lot more things I wanted to do in Nashville, but because there was so many places to be at certain times, I wasn't able to get through all the ones. I managed to see some of the big speakers, but you're right. If it's all in one space, you've got a better chance of doing what you want. But that's a great update. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, most definitely. We couldn't be more excited to go check it out for the first time. So guys, take a look on the website. Make sure you schedule that one in the calendar coming up in March. Dennis, thank you so much for the time. We understand you're super busy, got a ton of things going on. We all appreciate what you're doing for the space, and we welcome you back at any point to give us an update.
Thank you, Bryce. And then before I go too, people should know we'll have a huge Twitter Spaces coming on Thursday. Very, very big announcement. Make sure you tune in for that. We are going to be able to have some really, really important news, which I think is going to really be, it's going to change the paradigm for Bitcoin for certain. I wish I could share more, but people have to tune in for that.
We'll be there. Ears open. Thanks so much, Dennis. You guys hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.